All right. Hello. Is anyone here yet? All right. I'm not seeing anything in the comments yet. So just going to wait a couple of minutes while people come in. Hello. All right. So we've got at least one student in. Anybody else present yet? All right. So just going to wait another minute or two, and then we'll get started. I'm Malice Gaming. I'm just going to call you Malice for now. Or is there another name that you would like to go by? Okay. All right, we'll go with Malice. And just want to check. So I'm going to hold this up. Do you have this PSAT test booklet? Excellent. All right, let's just wait 2 more minutes and then. Okay, yep, excellent. Go grab it. Let me know when you're back. All right, that was fast. Excellent. Okay, just gonna wait until 6:05 and see if anyone else filters in. Anybody else present? I see a few more spectators coming from Score at the Top. Anyone else, if you're here, if you could just put your name in the chat, that would be excellent. All right. All right, let's get started. We'll see, maybe more people will join in as we go. But Malice, we'll start with you. And I think there may be others present that just aren't typing. All right. So, Malice, if you could just open the PSAT book over to page 2. That's where we're gonna get started. So tonight we're gonna cover the reading test. So section 1 of the PSAT. Before we get started, I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Sam. I'm a tutor at Score at the Top. I focus primarily on SAT and ACT preparation. So generally work with high school uh, juniors, seniors, and then also the occasional sophomore, uh, right, when we're doing PSAT preparations. Oh, hi, David. Welcome. Um, so, so I was just introducing myself. I'm Sam. Maybe you caught it. I'm not going to do the whole thing again. But yes, so I'm a tutor with Score at the Top. Um, I also am a high school English teacher, so I teach 11th and 12th grade English, uh, AP, world literature, uh, all of it. so, so yeah, I am somewhat uniquely qualified. Well, maybe not uniquely, but I'm I'm qualified to really cover and go deep into the reading test with you guys. It's something I've spent a lot of time on, um, both on the SAT and PSAT. So yeah, let's get started. David, do you have this book as well? Oh, all right. No worries. So looks like we're starting at 6, and we'll go for an hour to an hour and a half, if that works for you guys. Okay. So David, just want to make sure, do you also have your PSAT test book? All right. I will just assume yes for now. So we're going to open up to page 2, and that is the beginning of our reading test for the PSAT. Okay, yeah. Huh, interesting. It sounds like maybe there was a miscommunication somewhere along the line. Yeah, I'm glad you got in early as well. Um, all right, so who knows? Maybe if there was a miscommunication somewhere, maybe we'll have some more students coming in about 30 minutes from now. Um, so if so, great. If not, glad to do the group with you two guys. Um, all right, so we're gonna get started on page 2. So that's the first passage of the reading test. As you can see, it's 60 minutes, 47 questions for the PSAT. Really similar to the full SAT. So the full SAT is just 5 more questions. So it's going to be 52 questions, and then you're going to have 5 more minutes. So 65 minutes. Oh, cool. You're super welcome, Malice. It's it's my job, but it's my job for a reason. It's something that I've gotten good at over time, and it's something that I actually enjoy doing. So glad to be here with you guys. Um, so yes, like I was saying, the reading test is going to be really very similar to the SAT. It's just slightly shorter. The difficulty really is not going to be significantly less than the SAT. There's always conflicting information about that. It's my take, having done a lot of these tests, that the PSAT is only like very slightly easier. Just so you know, right, what do you have to look forward to with the real SAT? It's just going to be a little bit more difficult, a little bit longer, but not a significant difference. All right, so uh, we're going to do one of these passages together. So first off, just going to give a little more information about like my basic strategy with this stuff. Um, so one thing that I usually recommend, or always recommend, is that I always recommend that people actually like read the whole passage rather than skimming it. I know that there's a limited amount of time, and it can be really tempting to skim to save time on these, but my take is that this generally backfires. Usually, skimming, you're just not gonna like process the whole thing as well. You're not gonna remember as well. That's gonna leave you at a disadvantage on the questions, and also, it's maybe not even gonna save time because you're probably gonna have to go back to the passage more frequently to reference it in the questions than you would otherwise. That's just my advice. Excuse me. That's just my general advice. If you found skimming to be like really effective for you in the past, then by all means do what works for you. I just find that most people who try skimming, it doesn't work as well as they think or hope it might. So for this workshop, we're going to read through. I guess I usually have, like when I'm doing in person or uh, other workshops, uh, I'll have students like kind of alternate reading out loud. For this one, I'm going to read it. So uh, I hope you guys don't mind. Just to confirm, have you have any of you done this test already? Because I don't want to be repetitive if you've already done all the reading passages, or is this brand new and you're just sort of like opening up a blank packet? Malice, do you think you've done it, or do you have like the answers already done, or is this something you did a while ago? You took it back in October. Okay, so this is like you actually took this one. Okay, but still, that's a while ago, so we're gonna read the passage again. David, is this familiar to you as well? And if so, have you done it recently, or did you take it back in October? Yeah. Okay. So again, it seems like it's a while ago. I'm still gonna read it, uh, just because I want to have it like fresh in everybody's minds. So as I'm reading, um, I want both of you or anyone else who's here as well. Um, as I'm reading, I would like you to sort of read along, so just like follow the text visually as if you're reading it to yourself. Um, that way, you're sort of like going through the experience. You're not just listening to my book on tape version. All right. Um, so another thing I'm going to point out before I start is that you'll see. Oh, actually, you know what? I just want to confirm one more thing. I heard that you might have different versions of the test. I think I just want to confirm, is this first passage for you? Is it does it say this passage is adapted from Edith Wharton writing a war story? Just want to make sure we're starting on the same page. All right. So, yeah, just let me know if it's starting with that. If it's not starting with that story, then just flip over to whatever whichever passage. Okay, no, you see adapted from Mark Sluka. Okay, um, let me just check. I think that they might have just switched the order of the passages. Let me see. Hmm. Okay, wait. I've got George Musser. I've got Daniel Pink. David Chandler. Erica Wyman. Hmm. Okay, that's a little bit problematic. Looks like. Do you have any of those names that I just said? It looks like we might actually be looking at different tests somehow. If that's the case, let me see if the packet. Okay, fall 2022 practice test 2. Yeah, so the one that I'm holding is an official one. So it's from this test book. Um, I'm not seeing the number. I can, but I'm familiar with the one that you're talking about. I think I can just pull it up online. So give me a moment. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Yeah, Miles, take a look. And then, David, do you know which? Okay, yours starts with war story. Okay. All right. So, Malice, if you can find that, I'm also looking online to find the one that David and I are working with. So, if you can't find it, hopefully I can send it to you. Let's see. Okay, you got it. All right. So, I'm gonna talk about some other strategy stuff. Um, you sure? All right, so I'm going to I'll start reading it. This way you can listen even if you don't have it opened up yet. And then once you've got it open, you can just jump in. All right. So all right. So before I begin reading, what I was going to say is that I recommend always reading this little blurb, right? So you got the little blurb right over here at the start. Uh, in this case, it says, "This passage is adapted from Edith Wharton, Writing a War Story, originally published in 1919. Right, it's not a ton of information, but even just like getting the author and title could be helpful. Sometimes we may know the author, so it may sort of activate some prior knowledge. Um, but really, like in this one, for example, the most helpful thing to me that's in that blurb is just 1919, right? That publication date, it kind of like tells me, oh, this is okay, awesome mouse. So it kind of tells me that, okay, this is written 100 years ago. So the language is going to be a little bit different. So I kind of can adjust my expectations about what I'm working with. If I read this thinking that it was like a modern novel or like from a current magazine, I might be a little more confused than I would be otherwise. So I recommend always reading the blurb. It's going to give you good context, and sometimes it's totally essential. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into this, read it quick, and then we can do let's do the questions together. All right. So read along as I go. Uh, she, Ivy Spang, oh, and I'm just going to actually restart with the blurb. This passage is adapted from Edith Wharton, Writing a War Story, originally published in 1919. She, Ivy Spang of Cornwall on Hudson, had been asked to write a war story for the opening number of the Man at Arms, to which the queens and archbishops and field marshals were to contribute poetry and photographs and patriotic sentiment in autograph, and her full-length photograph in nurse's dress was to precede her prose. And in the table of contents, she was to figure as Ivy Spang, author of Vibrations, a book of verse. She was dizzy with triumph, and went off to hide her exultation in a quiet corner of Brittany, where she happened to have an old governess who took her in and promised to defend at all costs the sacredness of her mornings. For Ivy knew that the morning hours of great authors were always sacred. She shut herself up in her room with a ream of mauve paper and began to think. At first, the process was less exhilarating than she had expected. She knew so much about the war that she hardly knew where to begin. She found herself suffering from a plethora of impressions. Moreover, the more she thought of the matter, the less she seemed to understand how a war story, or any story for that matter, was written. Why did stories ever begin, and why did they ever leave off? Life didn't. It just went on and on. This unforeseen problem troubled her exceedingly, and on the second morning she stealthily broke from her seclusion and slipped out for a walk on the beach. She had been ashamed to make known her projected escapade, and went alone, leaving her faithful governess to mount guard on her threshold while she sneaked out by a back way. There were plenty of people on the beach, and among them some whom she knew, but she dared not join them lest they should frighten away her inspiration. She knew that inspirations were fussy and contrarious, and she felt rather as if she were dragging along a reluctant dog on a string. If you wanted to stay indoors, why didn't you say so? She grumbled to it, but the inspiration continued to sulk. She wandered about under the cliff till she came to an empty bench, where she sat down and gazed at the sea. After a while, her eyes were dazzled by the light, and she turned them toward the bench and saw, lying on it, a battered magazine, the midsummer all-story number of Fact and Fiction. Ivy pounced upon it. She had heard a good deal about not allowing oneself to be influenced, about jealously guarding one's originality, and so forth. But her story had to be written, and she didn't know how to begin it, so she decided just to glance casually at a few beginnings. The first tale in the magazine was signed by a name great in fiction, one of the most famous names of the past generation of novelists. The opening sentence ran, "In the month of October, 1914," and Ivy turned the page impatiently. She may not have known much about story writing, but she did know that that kind of a beginning was played out. She turned to the next. "My God," roared the engineer, tightening his grasp on the lever, while the white, sneering face under the red lamp. No, that was beginning to be out of date too. They sat there and stared at it in silence. Neither spoke, but the woman's heart tickled like a watch. That was better, but best of all, she liked. Lee Lorimer leaned to him across the flowers. She had always known that this was coming. Ivy could imagine tying a story on to that. But she had promised to write a war story, and in a war story, the flowers must be at the end, not at the beginning. At any rate, there was one clear conclusion to be drawn from the successive study of all these opening paragraphs, and that was that you must begin in the middle and take for granted that your reader knew what you were talking about. Yes, but where was the middle, and how could your reader know what you were talking about when you didn't know yourself? After some reflection and more furtive scrutiny of fact and fiction, the puzzled authoress decided that perhaps if you pretended hard enough that you knew what your story was about, you might end by finding out toward the last page. After all, if the reader can pretend, the author ought to be able to, she reflected, and she decided, after a cautious glance over her shoulder, to steal the magazine and take it home with her for private dissection. All right, so that is our story. I think, honestly, I thought not that dated for 100 years ago, right? It didn't have super old-timey language like we sometimes get. Um, we'll discuss it a little more later, but let's just dive into the questions. So if you two don't mind, if you could just sort of, I'm going to read the questions, and then if you could each kind of like share the answer choice in the chat that you think it is, and then we'll review the answers. So number one, as used in line 8, figure most nearly means what? Okay, so just put in your answer choice for number 1 once you've got it. Okay, just gonna wait another minute. Or if you have no idea, you can you can also type that, and then we'll just go through and answer explanation. Did I put you guys to sleep with my reading? All right. All right. Well, I'm just going to continue. So basically, for question number one, our answer is A, appear. So these are vocab. This is a vocab and context question. Um, right. So make sure with these vocabulary questions that you always refer back to the text. Right. So here it gives us line 8. So if we read through that quickly, we'll see. Okay, I'm actually going to read the whole sentence. That's what I generally do instead of just reading that one line. So the sentence that includes line 8 is going to say, and her full-length photograph in nurse's dress was to precede her prose. And in the table of contents, she was to figure as Ivy Spang, author of Vibrations, a book of verse. So there, it makes most sense that she's going to like appear in the magazine, right? So she was to appear in the table of contents. Um, we could actually like plug in all of the choices in our head. So like, right, see, like, does it make sense that in the table of contents she was going to form? Right? No. Is she going to reason in the table of contents? That doesn't make sense. Is she going to calculate in it? No. So, right, from that context, we get that it's A. And again, like, right, if we just thought this was like a general vocab question, we might not look back. And I might think, like, oh, like figure, that usually doesn't mean to appear. Like, we never say, like, I'm going to figure somewhere. Uh, so I would probably have guessed incorrectly and thought, like, oh, like reason, like figure out maybe, or appear like somebody's figure. Um, so yeah, just always look back. All right, so gonna go to number two. Number two, the passage indicates that when Ivy begins to work on the story, she feels what? All right, so if you guys are there, just take a look at number two and plug your best answer into the chat. Okay, I'm just gonna wait a few more seconds and then we'll go over the answer to this one. Okay, so for number two, the answer is A, right? So she feels overwhelmed because she finds it difficult to organize her ideas. Um, to me, the trick with this question, so I'm just gonna do like process of elimination. Um, I didn't quite have to be honest, doing this one. I think I pretty much narrowed it down to two and then just checked. But still, let's just eliminate C and D. We can just eliminate because they're clearly not accurate. Um, Oh, my bad, not C. We can clearly eliminate B and D. So B, discouraged because her deadline for completing the story is approaching. Um, it doesn't really mention the deadline, especially not in the beginning. D, inspired because she's able to spend time by the ocean. Uh, she definitely, right, she's not really thinking about the ocean until later. When we're talking about the beginning, right, when she begins to work on the story. Um, so it's going to be either A or C. If I look at C, excited because her work will be featured with that of royalty. So that one's tempting because it does mention in the beginning she is super excited, right? She's pretty psyched about this. She says that, let's see, uh, archbishops and field marshals were to contribute poetry and photographs. there's an exclamation mark at the end of that sentence. It says her full-length photograph is going to be featured. She was dizzy with triumph. I'm just reading little details. So, right, she's dizzy with triumph. She's going to be featured with royalty. So, right, it sounds like C could be the case, but keep in mind what's the question asking? And the question asks, the passage indicates that when Ivy begins to work on the story, she feels. So she hasn't started working on the story yet at that point. So when she's like dizzy with excitement and like all excited she's going to be featured with royalty, it's because she's been asked to write a story, right? Once she actually starts to write the story, later on in that first column, she's like immediately kind of immediately kind of bored, right? She's immediately like overwhelmed and bored. She's like, where do I start? Like, what even is a story? So we got to focus carefully on the question. All right. Going to number 3. It can reasonably be inferred from the passage that one realization Ivy comes to about stories is that. All right, let's take a moment to look at 3. All right, and I haven't heard from anyone in a bit, so I just want to check for signs of life. If you could just put something in the chat letting me know that you guys are here, that would be awesome. All right, well, I'm going to press onward, uh, hoping that somebody comes back to listen to my tutoring. All right, so we're going to look at 3. Being totally honest here, this one's a little tough at first, right? So we might not be super clear on it. Going through it, I was able to get the answer, but I didn't feel super confident in it. So I just want to point out before I go into the answer explanation for 3 that with a lot of questions in the reading section, you're going to notice that the next question uh, or the question following is going to be one of these best evidence questions. So just holding it up here, right? Question 4, we can see all these line numbers. And when we see that, without even reading it, we know there's a pretty good chance that it's going to be asking us for what's the best evidence to the question beforehand. So if you're ever having trouble with a question, like you're trying to struggle with it, you're kind of struggling with a question, just take a look and see if the question beneath it is a best evidence question, because if so, we can actually use the best evidence question to help us get the answer to the first one. This way, you can end up getting both questions correct rather than both incorrect. I know sometimes people freak out with these question pairs. They see you're struggling on the first one, then you see the next one is like asking you for the like why did you put the answer to the first one, and you're not even confident in that answer. So, right, you're like, I'm gonna get both of these wrong. But no, it doesn't have to be that way. If you're struggling with the first one, what I recommend is just like get those answer choices in mind, right? So for number 3, I'm gonna be like, okay, uh, what are the reason? What is the realization that she comes to about stories? And is it A, that the best ones are typically written in a few days? B, there's a skill to writing them that she's incapable of learning. C, there's an artificiality to them that she had not anticipated. Or D, they must address issues relevant to a particular historical time. All right, so I'm going to try to hold those in mind, and then I'm just going to go read all of the lines in question 4. And I know that one of those line numbers, right, one of those quotes from 4 is going to have the right answer to number 3. So I'm going to find it somewhere in there. So in a way, it's showing me somewhere where the evidence is for the previous question. So anyway, for number 3, the answer is C, right? There's an artificiality to them that she had not anticipated. Again, a little difficult, but we could also do this one with process of elimination. This is really how I did it originally without looking at the best evidence yet. So A, the best ones are typically written in a few days. Yeah, it doesn't really imply that she comes to that realization. The other thing is that we might think that maybe she thinks that because she's like expecting inspiration to sort of strike her, but it's definitely not something that's like a realization she has that they're written in a few days. Then B might be tempting, right? There's a skill to writing them that she's incapable of learning. Right? She's realizing like, oh man, like I don't really have this skill that I kind of thought I did. Like I'm struggling more than I expected. There's more to this than I was thinking. But she doesn't, it's a little too much, or like it's too intense to say that there's a skill to writing them that she's incapable of learning. Like there's no point where she's like, she discovers like, oh man, I don't have a shot. Like I'm never going to learn this. She might be discouraged, but she's not that discouraged. So it's not B. And then I can eliminate D. They must address issues relevant to a particular historical time. No, that one we could be tempted into because she realizes like, oh, I've got to write. Like I like these romance stories or whatever, but I've got to write about this war. But that's like she's just remembering that she has to write about the war. She's not realizing that stories in general have to be about a historical time. So our best answer is going to be C. There's an artificiality to them she had not anticipated. And then I'm just going to go straight to the answer for number 4. So 4, our best evidence is going to be B. So that's lines 24 to 26. If we take a look at it, let me just find my place. Okay, so why did stories ever begin? And why did they ever leave off? Life didn't. It just went on and on. Right? So it's right there. She's realizing, like, oh, wait. Like, I kind of, maybe she was thinking of stories as like a way, like, just something genuine and true. And she's realizing, like, actually, right, stories just start out of nowhere and then end. And that's not really how life works. Like, it's just kind of this continuous stream. So there's something artificial about stories that surprises her. All right. Number 5. In the context of the passage, the sentence in lines 37 to 39 mainly serves to emphasize Ivy's what? Okay. So anyone who is here, let's just take a moment to look at those lines. So 37 to 39 emphasizes Ivy's what? All right. So I'm just going to read the lines out loud. So 37 to 39. So just looking at it, she knew that inspirations were fussy and contrarious, and she felt rather as if she were dragging along a reluctant dog on a string. All right. So here, the best answer is going to be A. So it shows her frustrations with crafting her story, right? She feels like she's dragging a reluctant dog on a string, And the thing that she feels like she's dragging, the thing that's a metaphor for, is inspirations, right? That are mentioned at the start of that sentence. So yeah, that one's pretty clearly A. Just gonna go along. So number 6, the use of pounced in line 49 has the main effect of suggesting IVs. Okay, so just go check out line 49, and then we're gonna find the answer. All right, so the answer to this one is B. Right, so it's her eagerness. Um, the thing here that I think is important to point out with this type of question, and it's actually applicable to a lot of questions, um, but right, it points us to line 49. Right, so I'm just gonna go read where pounced is in line 49. So it says Ivy pounced upon it. So that's the sentence. Ivy pounced upon it. Um, if I just looked at that sentence, right? If I just looked at that, I just went where it directed me to. Um, it could emphasize her physical agility, like whoa, she's pouncing, she's really fast, or her crude manners, like whoa, she just pounced on this thing. You know, it. I don't know about deceptiveness. I mean, maybe, but or it could be her eagerness. Um, so if I just limit myself to that line, I'm not gonna necessarily get the answer. Sometimes you've got to read outside of the lines they give you, often like just before or just after. So in this case, if I go and I read the sentence before the sentence where she pounces, it says, right after a while, her eyes were dazzled by the light. She turned them toward the bench and saw lying on a battered magazine, the Midsummer all-story number of fact and fiction. Ivy pounced upon it. Um, that still doesn't totally give me the answer, but if I just remember, like, why is she pouncing upon it, right? I'm thinking of the broader context. It's like, oh yeah, she's super eager. Like, she just really wants to look at this magazine because she's like kind of like desperate for inspiration or some kind of help. Um, so again, don't be afraid to look outside of the lines they reference. All right, number 7. Ivy criticizes the opening sentences of the first 2 stories in the magazine because they. All right, we'll take a moment on this one. Okay, weird. It looks like my camera image of myself is frozen. 1 second. Okay. Hopefully that worked. All right. So for number 7, this one, I think this one's fairly easy. We could, right? Notice that here there's not a direct line that it references. Um, Personally, this is one that I was able to kind of get from memory without looking back. Um, and so the answer is that the answer is D. They're unoriginal and old-fashioned, right? So the openings of the first 2 stories are unoriginal and old-fashioned. Um, this I just remember that she's talking about like even though the first author is like really famous and well respected, like he opens with something like something like it was October 13th, like in the morning, and she's like, oh, that's really unoriginal. Like it's just starting with like what the time and date is. Right? It's been done over and over again, kind of boring. Um, if you didn't remember it, uh, what we could do is, even though there's not a line number, just try to remember like where in the story does it start talking about her reading the opening sentences of other stories in the magazine. And I remember that I'm like, oh, that's probably like somewhere towards the middle, maybe even a little closer towards the end. And just like scanning, I'm looking for quotes because I remember that it's like that she's quoting what she's reading in the magazine. And okay, right away, I see at the bottom of page 2, uh, bottom right hand corner, it says the first tale in the magazine was signed by a great name in fiction. And then it says the opening sentence ran in the month of October 1914, and Ivy turned the page impatiently. She may not have known much about story writing, but she did know that that kind of beginning was played out, right? So played out, right? That means that it's like been done over and over again. If we look at the next example, we don't really need to, but if we do, we can see that she reads another one and it says, no, that was beginning to be out of date too, right? So it's like, oh man, these have been done to death. So again, answer there is D. Let's move on. Number 8. The passage most strongly suggests that Ivy reaches which conclusion about the writing of fiction? All right, so take a moment on that. Anyone who is watching. All right, let's see. Okay, so here's another one, right? It's another best evidence pair. So 8 again, I think is a little. I think this is a little bit of a tougher question, and then it's followed up by a best evidence one. So I might, what I might do with this one, excuse me, what I might do with this one is kind of see if I can eliminate a couple of answers. So I'm like, uh, I think I can eliminate D. It's not a secretive process that can be communicated to only a select few. Um, it's not C. It is a creative undertaking that must reflect the beauty of nature. B. It can be facilitated by imitating the language of successful authors whom she admires. I'm pretty sure it's not that one. So, like, just process of elimination, I'm pretty sure it's A. It might involve a level of uncertainty that she had failed to consider previously. Um, I'm not 100% on it. So, or I mean, I am because I know it's the answer now because I checked and I was right. But I, I when I did it, I wasn't 100% on it. I was like, I think it's A, but I'm not super confident. So I'm just gonna like, maybe put a little mark next to it, and I'm gonna check the best evidence. But here's what I'm gonna do: is it says which choice provides the best evidence for the answer. I'm actually gonna start. Notice that it always has the earlier line numbers first, and then the later line numbers, or the latest line numbers all the way at the end. So here, I remember, I'm like, well, question 8 is asking about what conclusion she reaches about writing. So I think that the answer for the best evidence is probably going to be towards the end of the story, because that's like where she reaches a conclusion about writing. So to save time, I'm going to do 9 backwards. So I'm just going to check D. Does this give the best evidence that writing involves or might involve a level of uncertainty that she had failed to consider previously? Okay, so lines 84 to 88. After some reflection and more furtive scrutiny of fact and fiction, the puzzled authoress decided that perhaps if you pretended hard enough that you knew what your story was about, you might end by finding out toward the last page. All right, there it is, right? So that you might, if you pretend that you know what you're writing about, you might find out what you're writing about by the last page. So yeah, totally. She's finding out, she's realizing that there might be more uncertainty in writing than she expected. So now, awesome. Awesome. I've got 8 and 9 correct. And they basically helped to confirm each other. Okay, so again, if anyone is here, would definitely appreciate just a here in the chat or something like that. I'm going to continue just to be safe in case you guys are out there and just not interacting or not able to interact. I'm just gonna go until 7, and then we can conclude. So anyway, uh, one thing I wanted to mention about that passage, now that we're done with all the questions, is first it's good to know that the first passage in the PSAT and the SAT reading section is always going to be it's always going to be a fiction passage, right? So unless College Board decides to change this, it has always been a fiction passage first. Personally, I find that comforting. I think fiction. So these can actually be not the most difficult, but I'd say like some of the more difficult passages for some people because they're the questions tend to be more abstract versus like science passages where the questions are often more like direct or concrete. But I still feel like they're kind of starting us off easy in a way, because basically we're starting off the SAT or the PSAT by all you have to do is read a story, right? And to me, that's almost like not even work, right? It's like I just have to read a story, and I try to take that attitude when I read, especially fiction, but really, really anything in the SAT. I try to take this attitude that when I'm reading it, that I'm not gonna really get in my head about like looking for stuff like what's gonna show up in the questions, and to that end, also I don't read the questions beforehand. Although some people do and find that effective, which is fine if that works for you. It is effective for a lot of people. For me personally, I like to just go into each passage totally cold, and just try to read it without putting any expectations on myself. I'm just gonna what I am gonna do though is read it as though I'm interested. So for this one, it wasn't super hard for me. I'm like, I know. First, I almost always like reading a story. Um, I guess that's probably part of why I'm an English teacher, right? So I'm like, okay, cool. I get to read some fiction, um, but then also like I can find other connections that help to get me interested. So one thing that gets me interested is I really like sort of like early 20th century fiction. So I'm like, oh, cool. I like this time period. Um, I tend to like stuff from this time period. Then I see Edith Wharton, um, and uh, I know that she's like a really famous author who I really don't know that much about. Right? I know that she was like an American writer. I think I watched a movie once that was like based on one of her stories. So I know she's like a writer that I don't know a whole lot about, but that like I feel like I should know more about. So I'm like, okay, I can actually kind of learn something here. And then as I read, I just find other things that might catch my interest. Like one thing, I think it's about writing itself, like the process of writing, which is something that I have thought about a lot in my career and in my life. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like just thinking about writing process. Um, so all that I'm saying there, it's not that that you guys have to that I expect you guys to be like psyched about early 20th century literature or that I expect that you like want to read people writing about writing itself. Like, but those things might be really boring to you. But I think that you'll be able to find something that kind of catches your interest. So those are just the things that caught mine. So the reason that I do try to cultivate interest and I do this for science passages. I do this for every passage. The reason I do that is because it's like scientifically proven, and you can look at the research if you want to. If you, but it's scientifically proven that the more interested we are in what we're learning or what we're trying to pay attention to, the better we will pay attention, and the more we will remember it. So this should make sense to you if you just think about your own experience, right? You probably tend to do better in classes or with subjects where you're really interested, either in the material or like the teacher's engaging. Um, most people do worse, right? You don't go into like a class that you find really boring and then just like automatically do great in it, right? And there's a connection there. Whereas like stuff that you're interested in, you're gonna want to know, you're gonna put the effort in. So the thing is, and I didn't realize this until later, but you can realize it now, is that we can create interest, and part of how we do that is by connecting what we're reading to what we already know and to what we're already interested in. All right, so that's that. That's my little my spiel on cultivating interest. Uh, a little bit of an abstract strategy, but it is something I like to go over with people. Um, I am going to, for anyone here, I am going to just leave an email address in here. So if you found this useful um, and want to kind of like go in greater depth through maybe like more group or one-on-one sessions at Score at the Top. So like I personally offer lots lots of individual and group tutoring through Score, but we have a number of other really skilled tutors here. So if you feel like you want to put in some more effort, want to really get in depth, you can just email. Oh wait, it's giving me a little issue here. Hold on. All right, so you can email Kathy Rogers. So it's just Kathy at score at the top.com. All right, so that is Kathy. She's my boss and our center director. She is awesome to talk to. Really, so she's an experienced tutor. She is someone who is going to be able to coordinate and kind of like align you with the right tutor for you. So I'm just going to put her email in there. All right. So if you would like to set up more sessions, you can message her or you can contact Score at the Top by phone. So hope that was useful to people. It was it was definitely nice running through the PSAT and getting a little bit more in depth with these passages. So yeah, that's all that I got for tonight. I'm going to sign off unless there are any questions. So just gonna leave a minute. If anyone is there and has a question or comment, just leave it in the chat. If not, I will sign off in just a minute here. All right, well, thank you everybody. Hope you have a great night, and I'm signing off.